our customers. We have both process and technology in the same company. We are one of the top 5 U.S. ServiceNow partners and have over a decade of domain experience in each of their areas, but we do view all of this from a perspective of what we call customer-centric IT service management. At Evergreen, we think traditional ITSM thinking is just plain wrong because it puts the customer, the people we're really doing this for, last. Now, I'm really jazzed about our topic today because this and the next slide have been my call to action in past webinars, and today we're going to focus directly on just this topic. We need to start with the customer, and the customer should get a big win from the very beginning. Both the technology and the best practices can support it, and so it can be a reality. So let's get to it. Incident, problem, knowledge, change. If we start with a customer, it will actually change what we do.
Hey, Don, I had a lot of notes coming in that people were unable to hear us at the beginning. So if you mind me backtracking a little bit, just wanted to let everybody know the webinar that we're working on today is around incident, problem, and change and how that relates to the service catalog. We will be using the Q&A panel for all questions and answers, and we'll be using the chat function for you guys to communicate with us. So thank you for the notes, and wanted to make sure everybody could hear us now. And we will have this webinar recorded and posted at our website, and we will send out a link to the slides and to the webinar on Monday. So sorry, Don, for interrupting you there, but I wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page.
No, it's quite all right. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, and if you have any issues like that, he's monitoring the queue, so let us know. Okay, that's okay, because it allows me to leave my funny picture up longer. So if we really want to know why we're doing something, we start with whomever we are doing it for, our customer, and answer that question. Of course, many of us in IT have been doing just like this lady, coming up with solutions that serve our needs and then expecting or hoping that our customers will like them. We are looking through the wrong end of the telescope, and not to be unkind, but in the eyes of our customers, we might look just as silly. On a side note, I have to point out one thing here. This guy's hair is awesome, isn't it? I mean, it has to be 6 or 7 inches high.
It is awesome. I could use that. I'm a little not as tall as you, so.
I don't have any hair left, so. Okay. Let's keep going here. This is like the Tonight Show. As we often do, covering a few idle definitions is useful for getting us on the same page. 4 of them are relevant today, the ones we've been talking about here. And at a high level, incident is supposed to be service interruption or degradation of quality. For most, though, kind of the incident is the front door of IT for the customer. They'll call not only for interruptions, but with questions and requests. For our purposes today, and we're not changing the idle definition, but we will mean all inbound customer interaction when we're talking about incident. I hope you'll forgive that. Problem is where we try to reach root cause for a worthwhile issue and prevent or minimize its impact in the future. Knowledge is a store of relevant and useful information that can help our customers. Change is the process to control any modifications that could affect IT services. Every service has 3 constituencies: the customers, the providers, and the managers. All of them have to have their needs met to create a viable service. We recognize that we want to deliver great services that our customers will love, but we also want to reduce our own complexity and improve efficiency, accuracy, accountability, governance, speed, and quality. To achieve these goals, we follow an approach we call balanced design, and this can be of great benefit to you as you go forward, the kind of things we're going to talk about today. If we begin by designing for the customer in a way they'll love it and they want to use it, and we can also get what we want and have it driven by the customer's own self-service actions. Give the customer what they want to get, what they want, and then we get what we need. At the highest level, we must re-engineer and simplify work end-to-end for 2 reasons. First, if the experience isn't consistent, high quality end-to-end, the customers will reject it. We can't just make the front page pretty and then drop the ball. I know that sounds laughable, that we wouldn't do that, but if you think about the consistency of service delivery from the silos in IT, perhaps in your business today, maybe you just stop laughing. Point 2, if we go to the grassroots level with our providers and really simplify and improve how the work gets done, then we will also love it, and we'll lead our customers to the new way of doing business. Thereby, together, we overcome the big challenge of cultural change resistance, as a team. By focusing on the customer and the services they want and need, we can essentially transform IT. So the whole motion we're talking about today is left shifting one-to-one human interaction and replacing it with self-service and workflow automation. You could call it level 1 to level 0. These are common kinds of terms. And we also want to go from custom to factory-like. We're looking for highly repetitive, high-volume interactions of all sorts. Now, this is high level, but from an interaction standpoint, incidents feed problem. And if successful, problem lowers incidents. Incident, or inbound interaction, feeds opportunities for knowledge, and successful knowledge lowers inbound interactions. Change does have quite a bit of interaction with problem, as half or more problems usually have a root cause of failed changes made in the infrastructure, and of course, fixing them lowers future incidents. What we're doing is looking for an opportunity, like detective work. We want to investigate these areas and make changes that improve the customer experience and lower IT's work. Here's a process that can give some consistency to our efforts. We start with a broad approach to discover any possible areas for improvement, and since we can't fix everything, we review them for the ones that are the highest value. Next, we take those things, those opportunities, and look at the process end to end. Can we make it better, more simple? Then we determine, 1, can we eliminate it through self-service? And if not, can we dramatically reduce the work to do it through automation? Last, we have to publish it. We have to get it out where it can be seen for consumption and then lead our customers to it. So problem is the easiest place to start. It's a collection of thorny issues that we're already trying to understand and prevent in the future. Right up front, it's important to make it clear that many problem items may be too complex or too infrequent to be good candidates for elimination or automation, what we're trying to do. But some probably will be. So we know the opportunities are valuable and may well be on the path to understanding and resolution. What we may find, however, is that while we get to root cause, we may not be going all the way in the last 2 steps, really trying to automate or eliminate the issue rather than creating more manual human-based workarounds. And then leading the customer to different options or other choices that might actually eliminate the possibility of the problem altogether. As we mentioned, we're thinking of incident as service issues, queries, and requests, all that inbound customer interaction. As such, it's always going to be the greatest source of opportunity for improvement. But it does have some thorns too. We can't usually just walk in and say, hand me a list of your top 10 incidents, queries, and requests over the last 12 months by volume and type of user. But a little detective work can go a long way. Interview some of the level 1 and even level 2 people. Here's some example questions. What are the 5 things it seems like you're dealing with the most? What are the top 3 or 4 repetitive things you do all the time? What do you hate or like doing most? What do your customers complain about most? If you had a magic wand, what's the number 1 thing you would fix? Number 2, then take that list and ask them how they would fix them. Any ideas on how to eliminate this through self-service or by giving fewer but better choices to the customer? Then do the same with a few representative customers. This does not take very long to do. And the cool thing about it, you'll learn things that would not show up on a list if they get handed to you when you walk in the door. Okay? It does work. And like I said, it doesn't take a lot of time. Next, take the top candidates. Improve, automate, eliminate. Then publish and lead for consumption through services, requests, and knowledge. Are there any alternatives to detective work? Or better yet, maybe ways to augment it? Absolutely. 80% of the software and hardware our customers use to do their jobs every day is commercial, off-the-shelf stuff used by thousands of companies. So if we want to find out what issues matter to our customers, we can find them on the internet. I did a Google search for the top 10 issues of Microsoft Word, and I found this list with a lot of details supporting it from techiewarehouse.com. A search for Excel issues yielded Clement Nedelsub's blog.
That's a mouthful.
I practiced his name. And knocking around the Microsoft website gave me the most common issues with SharePoint. Pretty cool, huh? Here's a couple more, both around PowerPoint problems or how-tos. I learned something new. I didn't know Wiki has a site called WikiHow. So here's a story. I have a 2001 Suburban I've used for the past 14 years to haul a camper. I'm pretty handy and frugal, which is a bad combination. A few months ago, I had to replace the fog lamps on the truck. I ordered the parts on Amazon, searched on YouTube, found and watched a 10-minute video, and I replaced the lights. Without the video, I would not have been able to figure it out. With it, it was relatively easy. I probably could have gotten the same information pretty easily from the Suburban 2500 Users Forum. I bet you have a story like this. But do your customers? We provide hundreds of different technologies to our customers and organizations, and it's estimated that only 10 to 20% of the software features are even used on average. Does it matter how well people use their tools? We may make them easy to get or react to requests for help, but does that meet our responsibility to the business? Doesn't our mission sound something like this? Empowering employees through technology to achieve competitive differentiation. That sounds like most of the ones I've seen. I ask my customers, what are you doing to train people in ongoing effective use of technology? While it may be different for you, for many the answer I get is not very much. Thinking about availability and reacting has blinded us to our real responsibility. This is kind of preachy, but I think my question is, when will IT accept the responsibility for technical literacy? It certainly is a great opportunity to make a huge difference. Thinking of knowledge as share and learn could bring relevant information from inside and outside the firewall, from vendors, how-to sites, user communities, and other customers. It can change the value and power of self-support because it's faster and better than we provide ourselves. Our work in incident and problem, we just discussed, identifies opportunities for us, against which we can align these resources inside and outside the firewall to eliminate work through self-service and have happier customers. Then we publish and lead by bringing our customers to a powerful and easy-to-use self-service workspace to get what they need fast. The vendor multimedia learning support out there is phenomenal. Adobe brings a wealth of interactive tools and training, in this case for the Creative Cloud. Beautiful picture too. Microsoft tools probably account for 50% of the average worker's daily activities. They offer a tremendous amount of multimedia support for their software. Here are a wide range of training tools for Office and a very active Microsoft-sponsored SharePoint support community. The YouTube example I mentioned before is how people solve problems and learn how to do new things. While we can't guarantee it's 100% accurate, can we do that for the knowledge we create and offer? Community-based scoring gives us pretty sharp insight as to what is seen as valuable and what isn't by the customers using it. And as long as it's active, we can even know if the information is stale or not. I mentioned WikiHow earlier. This appears to be a competitor to YouTube in helping us. Their mission is to help everyone on the planet learn how to do anything. That's pretty cool. I excerpted part of the technical areas they support on the lower right-hand side there. You see phone and gadgets, software operating system, all stuff that sounds pretty relevant to me. Last, what if we took it a step further and created proactive, bite-by-bite curriculum to lead our customers towards technical proficiency in the tools that matter to our business from 5 to 10 minutes at a time? Then we throw in a splash of gamification and active internal coaches through collaboration. Check out a site called Udemy if you never had before. Some call it the future of education. They now offer Udemy for Business, giving you the power to create an internal university by leveraging outside courseware and creating your own. On the lower right-hand side, as an example, you see 3 Excel courses. We know that they're great because they're all highly rated and they're used by thousands. It's also cool that they're free. Can your knowledge make this kind of a claim? As mentioned, much of change is complex and requires careful oversight. We often find 4 or so change types out in the field in our work: high, medium, low risk, and then standard, or automatically approved, normal kinds of day in, day out, really low impact changes. But this granularity isn't always this precise. For example, many times we find low and medium risk changes going through a change advisory board review treated with the same materiality as high risk. And we find that a lot of low risk changes could really be standard changes, automatically approved, and they're really only going through change processes for compliance and audit trail purposes. So we can find opportunity in medium and low risk changes, pushing mediums down to low risk and then pushing lows down to standard. And we often find good volume too, which could make it worth our while. So once we collect our suspects in this, and a lot of this would probably be by interview, we identify the best opportunities, simplify and streamline the processes, and then apply automation and self-service for the change processors to reduce labor time and speed the work. For the case of change, and this is specifically for change, it really helps to have standardized, streamlined, and automated workflow processes pre-built and ready for use, specifically for low risk and standard change types. And now for something a little different. While we're very intent on delivering beautiful customer-centric services, doing so brings a very dangerous Achilles heel with it. Let's say you bought a receiver on Amazon and it was a great experience. Then you tried to buy a tent and it was horrible and completely different. Would you say parts of Amazon are great and other parts not so much? Or would you say Amazon stinks? You would say it stinks. So when you aim to deliver customer-centric IT, you raise the expectation bar, which is very dangerous. You better be ready to meet it, across the board, day in and day out. This is what we call the other side of the coin. Evergreen is working very hard on this, and what we're looking at here is what we call the Service Manager's Workspace. Here's a quick look at what we've been developing, and we do give you this solution out of the box. It's not just a dashboard, it's more like a cockpit, like flying an airplane. You need both reactive and proactive ability. It becomes the workspace where the service manager goes to reactively and proactively manage their service every day. Now, we're still working on this, but today it includes information on customer satisfaction, service quality, service availability, and service delivery. We are working to add more proactive measures, like the ability to directly interact with customers on feedback, easily see service workflow end to end, be able to post changes to the service right from here, and to be able to update and enhance features and options directly right from this space. So here are sort of the closing thoughts on all this, and hopefully, I hope it has added value, and that the slides could perhaps be a guide to support you, because it's one of those how-to sessions, I think, that we believe or hope that you get some benefit from in the longer term. So closing thoughts. Customer centricity absolutely and dramatically can change how we see incident, problem, knowledge, and change. It's a different way of looking at it. In the words from Russell Conwell's famous book, we are sitting on acres of diamonds. There's great opportunity all around us. Starting with the top 5 or even top 10 isn't all that hard, so we should get going. And there are best practices examples all around us. Last, turning knowledge into share and learn is a wonderful opportunity for IT to change the value that it provides. That's it for our presentation today, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and he will demonstrate some concepts in our platform that will align with some of the stuff we talked about today.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Jason. Share my screen here. So what I am going to focus on for the demo portion of the webinar is really on identifying those service improvement opportunities, kind of measuring the success, and then I'll highlight some of the kind of common service automations we see baked into the ServiceNow platform. Kind of to start, let me go to reports here. We'll go to this report. So I will say, to start with, ServiceNow does provide a flexible solution for reporting on some of these transactional opportunities or activities such as incident, problem, and change. You know, and as Don indicated, one of our goals in creating these reports is kind of to look after these trends, to try to identify some of those top 10 opportunities and insights. And this may be a starting point to then dig down deeper and interrogate a specific transaction set or specific category of ideas. And also you want to kind of look at, the top trends in a particular product or a particular service or on a topic area, and ultimately then set out a plan to reduce the volume, with self-help or other mechanisms. Another option that's out there is I'll go to this other environment over here. There is an application or a plugin called Performance Analytics. Give this a second to load. Hold on. There we go. And so what this kind of does, takes another step, takes the reporting a step further in terms of looking at trends, in terms of benchmarks, and also some of the things that are declining, inclining. It also provides you some opportunities to drill in a little deeper into your actual specific trends. So for example, I can drill into this. I can also break it down by different categories or different areas. And ultimately, I'm looking for and trying to gain insights into kind of where my trends are going and where I may be able to find opportunities to seek those service improvements. One of the things that Don indicated that we've done with our portal is we have created a kind of service owner's dashboard. Let me go to that real quick. And this is where that service owner can manage those service commitments, which in this case, up in the upper right, encompass resolution and availability, or and also some service delivery targets. And in addition to those commitments, I'm also concerned with the satisfaction of my service, which may not be fully measured by just meeting the commitments. It may come from the feedback we get from individuals as they rate and provide those services. And so one of the things that as a service owner we can do out here is we can take, say, like a new subscriber like Alice Smith, and we can ask them to provide their impressions and feedback to our service by clicking this little bullhorn. Which then what that does is for Alice Smith, who I have over here in another session, she gets a notification and comes out to the portal to provide that kind of service feedback. So she can come in here, she can rate the service. I'll just kind of enter in some text. Say the service is great so far, but I would like some more training on the product. Right, she can provide that feedback. If I toggle back and refresh, we should see now that Alice has provided her feedback. We see new feedback in the mix. Now, one thing I can also do is we have a little collaboration icon here that allows me to kind of talk or reply back and like various posts. And you'll see it's more of a thread-based activity here where I can provide replies, I can like various messages that people have submitted in regards to our service. So I can take Alice's note, I can like it, I can add a reply to it, right, and I might have some additional text I want to put here, saying basically that we are going to, have in our plans to work on some training videos and make this service even better. Oops, not sure where I lost my comment there. Apply that. Right, so all in all, we can use this then forum to kind of drive our ratings, drive our roadmap, kind of drive overall improvements that we're looking to meet and ultimately exceed some of our customers' needs. Let me just point out another aspect. So another area where we can get the service feedback from our users is on the actual service detail or service termstone view. There is an area where they can provide the feedback directly. There's also an option for them to submit an idea, which is a more formal process of requesting an enhancement or requesting a new service feature into the kind of mechanism to drive this service improvement. So it's a pretty simple form. It asks for kind of the title and description for this new idea. And I'm just going to say, let's do, ideally in the context of a Workday, we'd love to integrate Workday with ServiceNow. Basically, we want to be able to share information between the data we're managing in Workday with our ServiceNow solution. So she can submit this idea, and she's thrown into a status page where she can track the progression of this idea and how we're reviewing it and potentially approving this on the same status page where she can watch her incidents and other requests that are in context to her. Right, on the other side of this, so now we've got a new idea that's been submitted. So we've got an idea in our queue that's been submitted. The next step in this process is to determine whether we want to accept or defer this particular idea. So maybe we accept it, and this doesn't mean we're going to actually implement this solution. It doesn't mean that she can expect this idea to be put into action tomorrow, but rather we're giving it further consideration. And one thing it's done here is you see it's created a demand record in context to our idea. And this is where we'll do the more formal analysis of this idea in terms of effort, cost, benefits, and ultimately make a decision from a stakeholder list as to whether this is something we want to proceed with. And this ultimately, becomes an area where you have output that's going to be either an ongoing project to implement this particular feature, or it could be a roadmap item of here's what we're going to have planned for, the next quarter of a release in our particular service. Just to kind of complete this picture, if I refresh our status page, you'll see our submitter of this idea does get updates in terms of where the status of this particular request is. Now it's in an accepted state, and we do share some details with them about where the related demand record is and where it's in its state. So, once you've got these good sense of your kind of top call drivers or common requests, the top 10 list that Dawn mentioned, we can kind of put those into the self-service portal to try to drive down that, drive up the use of self-help and reduce the number of incidents that may be coming in. One of the things I want to highlight here is in our kind of this example portal we've created here, some of the things that are going on. One is there's a list or some highlights or headlines that are being pushed to the user, and these obviously would be targeted towards a specific user or the type of user, and these would be highlights or messages or key notices we want to point out to our consumers that can help them do their job and do their job effectively. Another area that kind of hits on that same kind of tone is the I want to section. And this is, trying to point users to some of the common requests that they may need to have in terms of getting set up on voicemail, get set up on email, getting software. And so this is where we would see kind of those top 10 items kind of being put into the portal to help somebody through interacting with those common activities. So for example, if I needed to arrange a video conference, this is where I would go to learn about that and be able to kind of solve my own problem for myself through this knowledge base article. Another kind of just one other thing I want to point out here too in this portal is when you go to some of the actual service items, go to enterprise restore request for example, we can also kind of provide contextual self-help or contextual top 10 list items say in context to a specific service or a specific item. So in this case, we're looking at restore requests, and we're also highlighting to them, here are some of the frequently asked questions in context to this particular service. So our top 10 list may be service specific, but they also, or they may be more of a macro kind of area. But all in all, we want to kind of steer our users where possible to help solve their problems. I want to just transition a second here to a slide just to kind of highlight some of what we see as common service automations that people tend to put into the ServiceNow platform. And some of these are probably, most of you probably would be accustomed to these or expect these in your list, but so some of them are password reset is still a very high call driver. We see variations of whether it's taking ServiceNow and integrating it to an existing password management system to creating something very custom on the ServiceNow platform. Access management and in adding, removing, and changing access is also very common. And in some cases, that may be a direct integration to an identity management solution, or it may be integrations out to, say, Active Directory or a target system. Data center computing power is also common. In some cases, we see the management of the process to make sure that we do have all the equipment accounted for. We got updates to CMDB, but we also have opportunities with our platforms and our APIs and integrations to reach out to a provisioning system such as VMware, EC2, or others that are out there as well. The middle area, ordering software and hardware, is also very common, and the processes tend to be very consistent in terms of getting authorization, checking inventory, purchasing those software or hardware with a vendor if necessary, and ultimately receiving and delivery to the end user. So there's a few others on here, but I'm going to kind of move on, and I'll highlight a couple of these on the ServiceNow platform. So to start off with, let me go to this area. Let's start with provisioning of access. So I'm going to go out and request access to a new piece of software. I'm going to request access, oops, not that one. I want to go back, hold on. I want to request access to Box. So new application Box is in our environment. I want to request access to it. And I'm basically provided a very simple form to get my access and say I need to share, say, files with my vendors. So I place my order. And this particular workflow is interesting in that it has it has a fulfillment plan which is intended to not have any human interaction whatsoever, but rather to integrate out to our identity management system and other systems to fully complete the process. If there were any issues or errors, then tasks would be spawned. So I'm kind of thrown into a special page that's basically going to auto-refresh as it's going through the activities. So I can kind of show you the workflow in a little more detail over here. And so the workflow, in essence, goes out and reaches out to our identity management system, provisions the access that's needed for Box, comes back, reaches into Active Directory, adds me to a couple different groups, does some validation activities or waits for an activity to complete, then does a validation, and ultimately delivers my kind of login and password information to the application. So it looks like it's all complete. If I come back here, you'll see I'm now, it says that status close is complete, shows me as a subscriber of this service, and also gives me an option here to start using it. So if I do this, then I'm launched out to our Box application. Now I can start dropping and sharing folders and files and with my vendors. All right, so the other one I want to go after here is kind of, I guess I'll show you from the perspective of kind of that I want to top 10 list. So one of the items that we had in the I want to was getting software. So this one's going to take me to a list of software items that I can in essence request to be installed on my machine. I'm going to drill this in a little further to just audio visual. We'll go into our Adobe After Effects. Now this one has a few interesting elements to it in terms of how the software is both accounted for and distributed to my workstation. One of the first things I can see over on my little right panel here is that I have two options for getting the software. One is a software push, which it means push to my workstation, and the other one is a download from the repository. I'm also being asked to confirm specifications. So you'll see if I try to order this, it's going to say, oh, nope, you need to confirm specifications. And so this is looking at what are the specs of the software and does it comply with my machine. I'm going to say, sure does, looks good. So the other thing is this is a piece of software that does have a license cost to it. So there's an aspect here where it's asking for us to determine how, or for me to provide how I'm going to pay for this particular software. I can either provide a purchase order, which is going to validate the purchase order number, or I can go a cost center chargeback kind of route. I'm going to go a cost center chargeback route. And notice I can spread this across multiple cost centers. I'll do this, we'll do kind of 40 and say 60. And we'll try to order now. One thing that's happening here is it's actually reaching into our financial system and validating the cost information, just so that it can make sure that when this is finally posted into ServiceNow or posted as an order, that we can actually handle the chargebacks immediately and there isn't any manual activities that have to do to reconcile how am I actually going to account for this particular software. And it came back and told me one of my cost centers has been replaced by another, so I can change this up. Just to show you, there's other validation here too. If my cost centers didn't total 100%, I should also get a validation here that it's not 100%. Now, the other interesting thing that happened down here is the distribution method, which I had software push versus download from repository, is it selected for me a software push. And the reason it did that is it recognized that my default computer that I use is a managed SCCM computer. We're using SCCM as our pushing mechanism. So it's basically telling me that I do have, that this is an available computer to actual push to. So it's recommending this as my way of getting the software. I could override this and choose from one of the other methods if I so desired. But all looks good here, so I'm going to go ahead and order this. I'll provide reason. I'll just say something basic. Place my order, and I should be thrown into my status page to start tracking my particular request. And it's giving me, an estimated delivery time of when I can expect this. It's telling me it's currently in an authorization phase. And let me just kind of go the other route now and show you kind of the workflow behind this. I'll go to that request item that was submitted. And you'll see here's all the inputs that we put in terms of how we're charging back the software. And our overall workflow looks like this. And this is modularized in the sense that this is one overall workflow, but you'll see there's an aspect here of it's looking at what payment method did I select. I chose chargeback. So there's actually a specific sub-workflow for the chargeback authorizations that need to take place. If I chose purchase order, I'd have a different workflow over here. And so this is basically going out and looking for the cost center manager to approve that. And then so that's what it's waiting on right now. There's an alternate approver here. Let me approve this. And now if I refresh my workflow, we'll see it's been approved. It's actually gone all the way through. And so some of the things that it did after approval is it looked at whether or not we had inventory for our license. Basically said that we don't have any shortage of our inventory, so we can proceed with deployment. If we had a shortage, we would have had a task that needed to be completed to rectify that shortage in licenses. And then it based off of our distribution, which we chose software push, it actually called another workflow out here specific for the push of the software to SCCM, which added the software to my machine, added my computer to the definition of being a member of that software, and then completed its activities. And the last steps of this process were it registered an entitlement for me into that license, as well as kind of close the loop with our financial system in terms of pushing those transactions, those cost centers to our financial environment. The kind of overall end state of this, just to kind of show a couple things, is we do log. These are the billing entries that were pushed to our financial system to say, here's the cost centers, here's the amount that is spread across the 40% and 60%. The state of process shows me that it actually did reach out to our financial system, pushed those transactions, and moved it in, returned back kind of a foreign key of that particular license transaction. And then the other thing that happened in here too is, just to show you the last line here, I said we did register an entitlement between myself and that particular software, which then means if I were to replace or refresh my machine, at least we have record that I am entitled to use this particular software, and that if we find this software on my machine, we can confirm that this is indeed a piece of software that Jeff should have on his machine because he does have a license for it and he is entitled to it. So that kind of highlights a couple service automations that I wanted to kind of hit on today. And I thank you for the time, and I hope this was helpful in terms of sparking some thoughts around your service catalog and your service catalog solutions.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right. Are you going to go? Yeah, there we go. Great. So if you found any of this interesting and you're wondering what might be logical next steps, here's a couple of different options from us. If you're interested in the things that Jeff demonstrated in the self-service catalog and portal, it is available as a self-service demo. You can get a login from our website. It's easy to find, and you can use it to your heart's content. You can play with it. It's very intuitive. You might find a few places where we're pushing the envelope a little bit and still building some stuff, but maybe that makes it a little more fun. But I think if you do take a look at it and try it out, you'd be very interested in what you find. If you're looking at a better way to organize your services, we do have a graphical way of organizing a taxonomy using a mind mapping technology, and there is a short YouTube video on our website where you can see how that operates, and really, really critical for any volume of services that you might be looking at. And, you know, last but not least, one way a lot of customers engage with us is with a one-day, you know, private service catalog workshop on site. And if you're considering a broader initiative but you aren't sure where to start, this is a great way to tackle it. It's for up to 15 attendees. It's designed to educate the team, uncover the key business drivers, and then create a common language and direction, you know, for the team. Gets everyone on the same page, and then we walk through the methodology and the tools we actually use as we go forward. So you learn a lot. It's very interactive as well as the day goes forward. We have been told you can save months of effort in consensus building and get a program moving. So that is something we do for under $4,000, which includes the cost of our travel. So we, of course, think it's a terrific deal. So that's all I have to say about that today, and we can open it up for any questions that have come in the course of the webinar.
All right, thanks, Don. We have a few questions out here. Let's see. The first one, I think this is probably for you, Jeff. And the question is, would the requester have been able to see who needed to approve the cost center charges in the current workflow? So tying back to the cost center distribution?
Yeah, I mean, it's really more of an option. In our default status page, we kind of show that it's awaiting approval, but we don't display exactly who the individual is that's awaiting that approval. But that would just be a minor configuration to say, here's the individual. But by design, we kind of just basically communicated back to the user that it's awaiting authorization before it proceeds to the next step. But including the name or the names of pending approvers is certainly a relatively easy configuration that could be made to that status page.
And that could certainly speed up approval process if you knew who you're waiting on too. So in some organizations that might be a good modification to make. There is a question here just asking if the recording of this session will be available. So I'll remind everybody that you will get an email on Monday from Stephanie, and she will send you a link to the recording of the webinar and to the slides that Don has put together. And that will also be available on our website at evergreensys.com. I have another question here. This goes back to the slide that you presented, Jeff, around the common automations. And the question is, are those automations ones that you guys see as important, or are they ones that Evergreen has experience in? Or maybe asking to how that list came to be, Jeff.
Well, I would say it's both. And I think for reasons that maybe be obvious is that a lot of our customers are looking to automate because there are big wins and in areas where there is significant, I guess, there's enough significant volume and a significant business value to put automations in place. So we've seen it both from a demand and need perspective as well as it's worked for us in terms of tasks that people are looking for us to help them automate. So we have experience building those as well, yes.
Yeah, I think we've done everything that's on that list at least once. I could be wrong about that, Jeff.
Yeah, and kind of as I went through that slide, I was highlighting there are variations in terms of how you approach those automations, and oftentimes it depends on what is the current state of, say, a password reset solution. Most everyone that we've dealt with has some sort of current password management, password reset kind of activity, and so how you mix those together. In some cases, there may be custom for applications that aren't hooked into those, and there may be cases where you're hooked into, say, a password management solution. And so, as I was saying, each service automation may vary a little bit from one customer to the next, but we have touched on those, I think, at least once in every one of those at least once.
Do you want to comment while you're talking on this really quickly, because automations are a big part of this particular webinar. I know we have pre-built some low and medium complexity workflow processes that make it easier to actually build workflows than in the platform. Do you want to speak to that, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, I mean, in general, and a lot of this depends on kind of the volume of service requests that you're looking to push through ServiceNow. So for a lot of our customers, and specifically some of those larger customers that are, that have 60 to 100 to 200 catalog items they're looking to put in front of their customers, what we tend to find is a lot of those, the workflow behind them it tends to be fairly common. There may be some authorization, there may be some sequencing of tasks, et cetera. So we have built some update sets into ServiceNow that are specific around kind of more of a user-friendly way to define that workflow. So it's really just one workflow inside of ServiceNow, but have some tables around it to define, here are the approvals for this particular catalog item, here are the tasks and the sequencing, here's the data, inputs and outputs to move from one task to the next. That can really speed up those lower to medium complexity kind of workflows, in essence have a more manageable way of kind of growing, I guess, scaling your actual requests you're going to push through the portal.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. So I've got a question here about, I guess it's to Evergreen. I'll let either Don or Jeff kind of answer this, but have you had experience with expanding ServiceNow, the portal specifically, across the enterprise, so going beyond IT? And I think, that's really relevant as we start talking a lot about how you interact with customers and you get other business units on board, and we've heard everything as a service kind of mentality. So. Right.
So at a high level, right now we're engaged with between 5 and 6 accounts where that is happening, as we speak, at different levels of adoption acceptance. And it's typically, that shared services approach around, it includes HR and acquisitions, legal, facilities, could be a medical clinic if you've got one on site. It might be security as well, physical security. So it's any of those broad kind of general services. And yes, we do have that. We've accommodated for it in our service catalog and our service structure for the taxonomies, right? So we've already done that as well. And we're also in the process of building with a couple of the clients a true service portfolio approach for lifecycle service management. And it doesn't exist in ServiceNow today. We have PPM, we have demand, but we really don't have something to take care of the useful life of a service and make sure we have compliance. We've got the process, we're managing our roles, who owns the service, what's that RACI look like? And we're building all that into the platform right now, which I think is pretty exciting. And we're going to come out with an offering for a service portfolio factory, right, that will be in ServiceNow that you can use to decide on, to create, to support and change, and then ultimately to retire services over their useful lives.
Yeah, good point there. That can be an IT service or a non-IT service that allows you to kind of manage that service throughout.
Yeah, it makes no difference. Service is a service, from that perspective. And where Jeff showed using it was kind of interesting. Jeff showed using a financial approval process. That was basically an objectified workflow, right? It was an approval process. It was an object, and he was calling it. And that's part of what we'll handle in that portfolio as well, which is making sure all the services and components are CIs and they're properly linked, so we know who is consuming a service we're producing, what services are we consuming that someone else is producing.
I had another request for a link to the recording of the presentation, and I want to promise that will come to everybody by Monday. You'll get a link to the presentation and to the recorded webinar. We've got another question here. How do you handle the manager approvals and other external manual approvals for business applications? So that's part one. Do you tend to integrate it with the service desk automated workflow or create a separate independent process?
So it would be something outside of the platform in a sense, right?
So how do going to those approvals that you need for a manager and other external manual approvals for business applications, would you customize that process, or would you integrate it with the service desk automated workflow?
Well, you could. I mean, I'm assuming, and Jeff, you can answer this, you could use email for someone. It really sounds like we're talking about people that are in the workflow that are outside the system flow, right?
Right. They're not going to be, I mean, and you can leverage the portal, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, you know, people can log into a portal and do some things, right? But there is an approval license, so I guess I don't want to get out of school with ServiceNow licensing, but I think that maybe is what the question goes to, is how do you deal with some of those approvals that are maybe outside of the system? Hopefully I got that right, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, so to hit on your point, Jason, I mean, if they are logging into ServiceNow and are performing an approval, that is considered a licensable user from a ServiceNow context, but there is a special reduced price license for just the approval right in addition to your self-service right. So that's certainly obviously option number one, but if you're trying to reduce the licenses for those approvers, doing approvals via email is certainly an option. You can always have a step in your workflow that would be kind of waiting for someone to actually kind of, say, a service desk, click a button for it to move to the next step. So you could have somebody as a liaison kind of take all the inputs, all the voting, or all the authorizations from somebody outside of ServiceNow, and then once they've felt they've got everything documented inside, either documented in ServiceNow or in other forms or whatnot, they could click a button to say move it to the next stage. So that's an option too, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like it's kind of a business decision if it makes sense to put a license out there for them depending on the amount of approvals, or there's a couple of creative ways to kind of make that work.
Well, then, you know, in any workflow, that, especially ones that are complex or very multi-stage, you're going to have automated things, you're going to have semi-automated things, and you're going to have really manual things. All of them will be inside that SLA end-to-end, right? That expectation of delivery.
Right. So I got another question kind of following up. So how do your portals work as far as moving from version to version of ServiceNow? So we've demonstrated these enhanced service catalog portals, and as you go to different versions of ServiceNow, what's the rework involved?
Yeah, I mean, because there's a couple of different answers here. I mean, we do have in the ServiceNow software store, we have an application you can install from there, which is our pre-built CMS-based portal that you can then build your own theme and style on top of. And with the application, it is a subscription-based kind of purchase. And one of the things you're getting with that subscription is the guaranteed upgrade support. And so, for example, we are in the process right now of installing our application in Geneva, making sure everything works fine. And so far, everything has worked fine. We haven't seen any issues with our application with Geneva, but we'll continue that process until it gets released. The other answer to it is we have skills in order to kind of build outside of our application a custom portal for you as well. And basically what we do is we would build those kind of with the mindset of, here are the things we understand today that would likely be changed from a ServiceNow upgrade, and try to prevent making configurations that would make it hard to upgrade in the future. But there's no crystal ball there, right? We don't know entirely where ServiceNow is going to go with some of these things, but we can always kind of help support those upgrades as well.
And as being a certified application in the software store, we have to be compliant with that. We have to integrate and effectively pre-integrate as a result of it, right? So that's part of what you get from being part of that store, and it gives you guys the assurance that it does upgrade.
Yeah.
The other part of it is you might have logic overlap where you did something this way in the previous version, and the new version of the software comes out and offers a different way of doing things. And you all deal with that today when it goes from one version to the next, right? So it's always possible that there's a logic overlap concern, but those are usually pretty minor issues.
So next question is, what is a typical build time to take ServiceNow enabled services and apply the self-service catalog portal certified app shown at the demo today and on our site? And are there areas of customization requested in terms of branding, needs, et cetera?
don't know if you want to take that one, Don. I mean, the answer certainly varies. I mean, we'd be glad to have a more detailed conversation, I think, with Amy to understand where they are with ServiceNow, where they're trying to go. But I mean, there is, for most customers that buy our application, we usually have some level of services to support it. Some, it's a matter of just providing the branding and maybe tailoring some of the pages to match your specific culture and needs. For some, we've also built the number of catalog items and requestable workflow or improved the knowledge base as part of those activities as well. So it certainly varies in terms of the activities and the scope of that engagement.
Yeah, there is a great deal, and I mean a great deal of functionality that comes out of the box operating. Okay, and so the things that we demonstrate are things that are real and they work today, right? It's what it is. The biggest, I'd say the easiest thing, and we've had customers get operational in a few weeks with a new customer-facing portal and a new brand new experience that really has a very nice interaction. It's got the ability to search knowledge, to open incidents, to request things, to buy things, to check the status of things. There's a lot of power in it that really essentially out of the box. And then we can even create services, which we call service tombstones. It's the look and feel of a service and the expectations and what's in scope and what's out of scope. That doesn't take very much time to create those presentations. The real big part of this, the real work, is behind that part where hey, we're not going to deliver this manually anymore, because if you do it manually and you want to keep doing it that way, it's no big deal. You just do it. But if you want to automate or you want to streamline or you want to simplify, if you really want to change it, then there's more work in that actual workflow that occurs. So if you've already created workflow that you're using, connecting it to consumption is not that big of a deal. It's the actual creation of the workflow and the re-engineering of that stuff where the real work is, and that's typically what gets done in phase 2 for a lot of organizations.
Thanks, Don. So we are right at the 3 o'clock hour. I have a couple more questions, but thank you for those who joined us. Want to be respectful of your time if you need to drop off at this point. I have a question here about, are there any special licensing needs to support what has been demoed in ServiceNow today? There was a lot of different things that we showed there.
Yeah, and I did jump around for a number of different things today, and I'd say the short answer is yes. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the approval of a workflow. That would potentially be a license for the approver to do. But as I mentioned, there was a separate product I went into earlier today, or a separate kind of plugin called Performance Analytics. That is separate. That is licensed separately. I do think there is some free performance analytics content you can utilize, but really to get the full benefit and power of it, you would buy a separate license. The other thing I guess worth noting is the kind of software push, and we had integrate out to SCCM, does utilize kind of PowerShell for the push, which kind of fits into the orchestration product or license of ServiceNow. So there may be the licenses for that.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think with the Fuji release, you get the ability to use performance analytics on a limited number of things, so you can really get a feel for that. But we've seen, companies that dive in there with that tool be able to do a better job at kind of getting those top 10 that Don talked about and look for places to improve. On that note with the SCCM piece, would we need to have integration with SCCM in order to do the software automation?
Not necessarily. I mean, I didn't dive too deep into the other methods, but software push was just one of the possible distribution methods that kind of had built, that we've kind of worked on in the past in terms of software, kind of software store usage. Some of the other options, obviously, download was kind of showed a little bit. There's also, shipment of the media, pickup from a location, and some of them maybe download from, I guess a public site. For some of the software you can get directly from a public site, right? In general, you kind of saw we did build it very modularly so that all the different payment methods and distribution methods have their own kind of workflow to it. So there's a very different kind of process for if I chose to say download the software versus in some cases I may end up having, I guess there may even be some software out there where you want to have, say, a technician actually do the software installed directly for you. So that might be an option where you'd say, I don't want any push or download. I want to have someone actually go on site and support the install directly.
And you know, it's kind of cool, that software example we're talking about, it could be hardware, it could be software, it could be anything someone wants to buy, right? Something requests. So we call it a software store functionality, but it's a store functionality. And the way we designed it, and we have built it for clients where it actually is unattended. You know, because if you go in through self-service, make your selection, get your financial approval, it updates the asset records, and then you download, because you're in a managed workstation, or you download or you get it pushed to you through managed workstation, you're using your software pretty quickly, right? And people in IT, they didn't have to do anything unless it breaks, right? And we have clients, one client with a couple of hundred software titles in a store and 150,000 consumers they're supporting with 3 people. And those 3 people aren't really very busy. They're really working on keeping the descriptions current, adding new titles, things like that, because they're no longer they're not the process anymore. They're not the work, right? The work is automated and linked through self-service.
So the next one here, should the news headlines and quick links shown in the portal be the same for all users?
I mean, I'd say ideally no. I mean, and Don talked about, obviously, some of this may be stepping stones or step into. You might take a top 10 list that's generalized across all your users. But I think ultimately, what you'll find is you will have different types of users that have different needs. And in a lot of cases, you do want to personalize those kind of top drivers or top self-service drivers to the user themselves. You know, one of the links you might have seen in the drop-down was like get a tablet. That may not be appropriate for some users, right? So we may not offer tablets to certain types of users, so obviously we want to maybe replace that with something else that's applicable for those other types of users. So I would think that certainly in your analysis of what are our drivers, that you'd also want to factor in your different profile kind of users and what are the right kind of top 10 lists for your different types of people.
So the last question, you know, Don, you mentioned your personal life, the knowledge of YouTube story. How do we help customers kind of balance that going to our knowledge for search and searching Google?
Well, you know, and it's going to get technical, which Jeff will probably have to back me up, but we want to create an approach where we work inside and outside the firewall. So we want to bring sources in that are relevant outside the firewall, and we also want to be able to search what we've got and create, you know, today it's not easy to create that in a compound scored view, but it's also not impossible to have multiple sources inside the knowledge workspace, right? So you can do it, and that's not that difficult to do. And I think as providers, what we really want to do in that area, and this is really just getting some legs now, I got to be honest with you, you know, things like Udemy are pretty new, and YouTube's not, but leveraging it properly corporately is pretty new, right? So it's a matter of us going out and qualifying and building those sources that make sense for our companies, and then putting them into the knowledge space so they can be found and searched. Right? Yeah,
and another thing we see is a lot of companies have multiple pockets of knowledge.
Yes.
So it's not just in and outside the firewall, but it's different places inside.
Yeah, and there are technologies that will allow you to create all that stuff in unified search, but like Covio is one. But you know, Google, well, inside the firewall, Google has a search appliance, right? It's another technology, and in some cases it can be expensive. You know, but we can still present apertures inside of a workspace, even if the search is not totally unified.
All right. Well, thanks, Don. And thank you, everyone, for your questions and for your time today. We hope you've enjoyed today's webinar on incident, problem, knowledge, change, and the service catalog, and you've seen how all those things relate together. Once again, a recording of this video will be on our website, and a link will be sent to you on Monday with the slides and a link to the recording. Thanks for your time, and have a good day.
Good day.